Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to start early today because Orli has asked for some extra time because she's got lots to tell us. So we are very privileged this afternoon to have Orli Weisser Pike from the States as our guest speaker, and she'll be talking about the person, environment, occupation model. Just a little bit about Orli. I sent you her resume, so I'm not going to tell you that. But Hazel met Orli at a conference a number of years ago. We were just trying to work out how long ago that is. But Orli's in fact been working in low vision for the last 17 years. Orli is proudly trained in South Africa, in Cape Town, many years ago. And then our loss was Tennessee's gain. So Orli, over to you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Hi, everybody, and warm greetings. Well, actually, it's chilly outside. We're in the Northern Hemisphere, so it's starting to get cold over here. But greetings from Memphis, Tennessee. And for those of you who have never heard of Memphis, Tennessee, it's somewhere in the middle of the United States, and we border the Mississippi River, which is a very important waterway in the United States, kind of splits the country in half. But that's where I am, and I'm at the University of Tennessee Health Science Center in the Department of Occupational Therapy, where I'm an assistant professor. I teach. I also have clinic, and again, this is a real honor to be here today on World Occupational Therapy Day. I want to just clarify for those of you who are attending that this talk is focused on occupational therapy intervention. So I'm an occupational therapist. I'm also a low vision therapist, which is kind of like a separate certification. But the talk today is focused on occupational therapy. I will not be going over any of the definitions of low vision or any of the statistics. But I do want to also make sure that we're on the same page. When I talk about low vision, I'm talking about vision that is not correctable by medications or surgery or eye exercises. So I'm not talking about interventions for people who have neurological based or have vision impairments of eye movements. So people who might be receiving vision therapy, I'm not talking about that today. So today's talk is about the person, environment, occupation model. Let me see if my controls are working. They don't want to work here. Sorry. All right. So the person, environment, occupation model was published. Two original articles that introduced the person, environment, occupation model were published in the mid-90s. So that's around about the time that I graduated from the University of Cape Town with my bachelor's degree in occupational therapy. And this was published in Canada by a group of Canadian occupational therapy researchers headed by Mary Law. So you may be familiar with her name. And in this model, person, the environment, and the occupation. So the person includes the physical, cognitive, spiritual aspects, as well as attitudes and preferences. So we ask, what is going on with the person? Next, we look at environments. The second construct is the environments, which are specific to the occupations for this client. So they can be, the environments can be influenced by the person. So, for example, like how a person prefers to have their furniture laid out in their house, or the environment can also influence the person. For example, if there's a lot of windows, or the layout of the environment. So we would be asking, so what's going on in the person's environment? And the environment includes the built and natural environments, but also things like the cultural environment, the political, economic, and the social environments as well, because I'll touch on those as well. The third construct is occupation. So according to the authors, occupations include self-care, productivity, and leisure, or whatever meets the person's intrinsic needs for self-maintenance, expression, and fulfillment in their roles. So we'd be asking, what occupational choices is this person making? Here we consider the actions, the tasks, the occupations, the occupational roles, and routines that the person is engaged in. And all these three constructs meet in the middle, where we define occupational performance. So occupational performance is the result of the overlap of all three of these constructs. So according to this model, the role of occupational therapy is to facilitate the best possible occupational performance and maximize the fit of these three areas. So fit, it's complex, it's dynamic, it changes over time, and the fit can increase or it can diminish. Now, the better the fit, so the better the overlap between the areas, the better the occupational performance. And that is represented over here by the yellow star. So if there's a good fit of these contracts, then meaningful participation increases, whereas a poor fit can threaten engagement or performance in daily occupations. So as OTs, we recognize that there's a dynamic transactional relationship between these three areas, and we may ask, how can we bring the person and the environment together, or do we need to make environmental modifications? Does the person need to change the environment in which the occupation is being performed? Does the task need to be modified? So we look at the areas of overlap. For example, the overlap between the environment and the occupation. So we ask, is this the right environment for the occupation, or do we need to find a different environment? When we look at the person and the occupation, we may ask, is the person capable of doing the occupation? Does the person have the skills that they need to be performing a certain activity? Or does the person need strengthening or cognitive retraining or training in aspects of the occupation? So I'd like to present to you for your consideration using the person, environment, occupation model to guide interventions for your clients who have uncorrectable vision impairment that results in low vision. So this is a very busy slide, and so I don't expect you to, and I will not read through it because I'm going to discuss specific interventions relevant to the person, to the environment, and to occupations. And I hope that this approach will help you to recognize, will help you as occupational therapists, or as people who work with occupational therapists, will help you to recognize and justify the role of occupational therapy in working with people who have low vision. So we're going to start off over here with interventions related to the person. And I'm going to start off with lens design. Now, of course, it's important for the OT to understand what glasses do. We do not control lens design. We don't make glasses. That's the role of the optometrist or the ophthalmologist, the optician, the orthoptist, whoever is going to be prescribing those lenses. But we can, as occupational therapists, we can promote the use of the appropriate glasses and explain how glasses work, because a lot of times people who have low vision have been told that glasses aren't going to help them anymore, and so they may not even wear their prescription lenses. So just as an overview, I want you to understand lenses. So lenses can be used for focusing, for fusion, and for field awareness. What does that mean? So lenses can help to focus the image onto the retina. And so over here on the left of the screen, we see a minus lens. On the right of the screen, we see a plus lens. So these are helpful in correcting refractive errors. And here is a some simplified diagrams to show how lenses can help to correct refractive errors. On the top, we have uncorrected myopia, and then a minus lens that shows how the lens can help to change the direction of light as it enters the eye, to make sure that the light lands where it's supposed to on the retina in focus. In the middle, we have uncorrected hyperopia or farsightedness, and a plus lens that helps to bend the light, so to speak. And I'm just using simple lay language because that's the best that I understand it. And then on the bottom, we have uncorrected astigmatism. So that's where the cornea is shaped more like a football rather than a basketball. So football in America, which is an elongated, I should say maybe a rugby ball for the South Africans. But basically, the shape of the cornea is steeper on one side and shallower on in another axis. And astigmatism can be corrected using a plus or a minus lens. It's a cylindrical design. But basically, lenses can be used to help to focus, to make sure that the best image arrives at the retina. Another design for lenses is for fusion. So that's when eyes are out of alignment. So I put up, if any of you are my age, I'm in my 50s. I grew up with Pink Floyd, The Dark Side of the Moon, which had a picture on the record of a triangle, like a crystal, and it had the whole light thing going through. So basically a prism is a type of lens. It's a wedge-shaped lens, and on the bottom, I'm sorry, some of these photographs are not very clear and sharp. I usually snap them with my phone, and over the years, so some of these photos are not professional, but they're from my own personal collection. But you can appreciate that one side of the lenses is thicker and another side is thinner. So it's a triangular wedge-shaped lens. And prism lenses are used to bend light, or to help the light arrive in both eyes so that a person can achieve singleness of vision. Another type of lens design is to increase visual field awareness. So if somebody has a visual field defect, then they may have lenses prescribed. Also, usually different types of prisms that help with field expansion. On the left side of the screen are two images. The top image shows the Gottlieb Visual Field Awareness System, which is a round wedge-shaped, kind of like a button-shaped lens that is placed on one of the lenses. And underneath that image is a little animation of how, when viewing through the prism, it kind of helps to bend or to bring the image into from the missing visual field into the person's visual field. And on the right of the screen is the Peli prism, which is another type of lens design, using prisms to help bring the image towards the person's center. I'm going to show you a few more pictures over here just to kind of give an example of what prisms can do for field awareness. Over here is just a snapshot of a friend of mine. I held up a prism right in front of the camera, and you can appreciate that the person to her right is now appearing through the lens towards the middle of the picture. So if a person was looking through the prism, they may see two images, the image that is directly in front of them, and then some of the image from the left, which has been shifted more towards the middle. This gentleman over here was using a Peli prism, and it's in his left lens. He had a left visual field defect, and I asked him if I could borrow his glasses and just kind of snap a picture through the lens, and you can appreciate that through the left lens in the upper and lower portions of this picture, when viewing through the lens, the image is now shifted towards the right. And here is another picture through that lens, through the in the middle where there's no prism. On the far left, there is a gentleman standing on the left side of a room, and then through the lens, the upper and lower portions of the lens, you can see almost like a ghost image of the person who's been split in two. This was a special kind of lens design of the Pele prism. Here's another picture for you to appreciate of how the Pele prism shifts images. But I wanted to go back to some of these images and just help you to understand that these prisms are typically designed, so the Pele prism in particular is designed for people who have a visual field loss. And I mentioned that this gentleman had a left homonymous hemianopsia, which is a visual field defect in both eyes. The left visual field is missing out of each eye. And so to kind of give you a sense of what he was really seeing when he was looking straight ahead, and I, again, by no means is this a real representation of a person's real full visual field. These are just photographs, but just to kind of give a sense and an illustration, a person may be seeing only the right visual field. So even looking through the lenses, they're just getting a part of the image, and can, while there's more than just the visual, the idea of just putting a lens in front of a person, we have to explain what it's actually going to do and how the person is going to see. They still, in this case, won't see everything, but it's important for us as occupational therapists to really understand how lenses are made, how they function, and what it might be like for the person who's using them and looking through them. Another thing about lens design is, lenses can incorporate many distances. So I'm wearing single lens glasses that are used just for reading. Most young people will wear glasses that are single vision just for one distance. But as we age, some of us need some extra help with reading. And so there's different types of designs within a lens. I'm sure you've heard of bifocals, trifocals, multifocals, or progressives, or varifocals. There's a lot of different names. There's also lenses that can change their color, so they may be called photochromatic or transitional lenses. Some might also be polarized, so they have a special filter on them. So we want to understand that as well. So it's really important to understand that multifocal lenses are basically looking of two pairs of glasses, or sometimes even three glasses in one frame. The lens incorporates multiple distances. So it's known through research that multifocal lenses, it blurs the inferior visual field. So the bottom part of the lens is for up close activities, for reading. So when just walking around, it will blur the inferior visual field for ambulation. So it also impairs hazard detection during ambulation. And for a person who's just walking around in their bifocals or trifocals, can also alter their posture and their center of gravity. And so we want to know, like, is this really the best type of lens design for this person's lifestyle? Here are some pictures to illustrate what it's like for a person who's using bifocals while walking around. The image on the far left, the lady is looking at the edge of her rug. So this was in the person's home, and she had rugs, and of course I was assessing for fall risks and any tripping hazards, and I just took a picture of her, and I asked her, like, I want you to make sure that you can see the edge of the rug clearly. And so in order to see it clearly, what she was doing was she was leaning over and she was tucking her chin in. What she was actually doing was making sure that she was looking through the top part of her glasses, because that is the distance segment of the glasses, and that's where she could see the edge of the rug more clearly, and you can see that her posture is more stooped or bent over. And then when she took her glasses off, and she could then clearly see where the edge of the rug was. She happened to be a person who'd had cataract surgery, and so she didn't really need the top portion of her glasses because the cataract surgery had corrected her distance vision. But she was a habitual bifocal user from all the years previous to her cataract surgery. She needed the bottom section for reading because of her age, because of presbyopia. But these are considerations. I'm not saying that as an OT that we are going to make changes to people's lenses, but we need to be asking questions and just understand how lenses work, and if they meet the person's needs. Here is another example of how this person, the design of the lens really didn't meet this person's needs. So when she was reading, the reading segment of her bifocal was so low that she needed to use she needed to use her hand to get the alignment in position. So that's just a little bit about lens design, and it's really important for us as OTs when we're working with people with low vision to understand how lenses work. And again, I'm no expert. I'm not an optometrist. I'm not an ophthalmologist. I'm not an expert at refraction and measuring, measuring to correct people's vision. But I think it's very important to just understand some basics about lenses. So next we're going to talk about glare reduction and contrast enhancement. So this is again using filters, so colored lenses that help with controlling the amount of light that's entering into the eye. So some people also have glare inside the eyeball, intraocular glare, and so having colored shades, colored filters can help reduce the amount of light that's entering the eye. They can help with contrast enhancement. They also can help with the change from light to dark or dark to light. So I'm sure if any of you have ever been outside on a sunny day and the phone rings inside and you run inside and you kind of feel blinded for a minute because your eyes haven't yet adapted from light to darkness. Or if you're in a movie and it's very dark inside and the movie ends and then you step outside into the bright sunlight and you kind of feel blinded for a minute, that transition from dark to light, that adaptation of the visual system, it takes longer as we age, and so wearing the filters can help to reduce the amount of time, can help a person with that. And then filters are also used for eye protection. Hats and visors can be worn. They help to remove overhead glare sources. And, just, I'm sure, again, you've stood on a beach and you were looking for somebody and you may have put your hand in front of your eyes like this and you're shielding your eyes from some of the light. So removing some of that light, some of the quantity of the light that's just coming in through your eyes, that also helps to make it easier to see. So hats and visors are also things that we can do with a person and help them understand that if they wear them, that will help. Next is a key to awareness of the missing visual field or the scotoma. So what is actually going on with a person's vision is really important, and it's also the key to the next step, which is the retraining of fixation or scanning. But let's just talk about awareness of that area of vision loss. So I have worked with patients for almost 2 decades now, and oftentimes people can't really articulate what really is going on in their vision. I'm sure that you are aware that if you close one eye, if you only look through one eye, if you have typical vision, if you have normal vision, if you just close one eye, we have a blind spot. We have an anatomical blind spot. But if you just close one eye and you try and see where that blind spot is, you probably won't know unless you play around with your finger. And there are ways to discover where your anatomical blind spot is. So it's not something that is obvious where that blind spot is, but making your patient aware of where the missing field is a key. And so working with your patient to understand, is it central visual field loss? Is it a scotoma, right? Or is it in the periphery? Is it a hemianopsia, or is it from a glaucoma? Like, is there missing visual field in the periphery? Which eye? Is it both eyes or just one eye? And there might be differences in the eye as well. And then for the next stage, what strategy are we going to use in order to retrain fixation or scanning? Is it going to be a head movement or an eye movement? And also, part of developing that awareness is can be done using just eye movements as well. I'm going to show you a little tool that I've used, and it's a real simple tool. I think you're going to like it, and it's going to help with scotoma awareness. But before I go there, I just want to explain on the right side of the slide, I have a very old, this is a very old slide from an old study that was done about the prevalence of blind spots in the visual field. This was done by, I believe, Ron Sucard and Donald Fletcher over here in the United States, maybe in the early 2000s or the end of the 1990s, I believe, where they looked at scotomas and the relative placement of the scotoma relative to the center of the visual field. And they found that for English-speaking people in the United States, the majority had a scotoma to the right of center, and then the next highest number was superior, and then left and down you can see the numbers for yourself. So about half of the people that were researched, half of the eyes had a scotoma to the right, a little less than half superior, about 1/3 to the left, and a little less than 1/3 inferior. Okay, so I was telling you about this tool that was developed by Dr. Manfred McCabe at the Smith Kettlewell Eye Research Institute in San Francisco. It's really simple. It's actually it's a piece of paper. It's a piece of paper that you, like a computer paper from your printer, and printed on it is this shape that looks like a black arrow with a little bit of space towards the edge. And so what you do with this tool is you ask the patient who has macular degeneration or a central scotoma, but you're not sure, but you're trying to explore with them to increase their awareness of where it is. You do it with one eye at a time. You ask the patient to look toward the point of the triangle. Now, we know with central vision loss that they will probably not see the point because that's the area most likely that of vision that's missing. But the very strong black and white shape and the very strong triangular shape of the arrow will kind of guides where their vision where they should position their gaze to find the point of that arrow, so the point of the triangle. And then while they're fixating on that point, you ask them to move this secondary target. So I've got a little smiley face on a little popsicle stick, but they move that against the black background, and ask them to identify where that target becomes less clear or where it disappears. And then the exploration can be done in any direction. It can be repeated. You can also do it to elicit the location of the preferred retinal location for fixation. So that is where it's actually seen clearest. And you can turn the page in any direction. So I'm going to show you a little video of a patient. And again, I apologize for the very poor quality of the videos and pictures in this presentation. But here we go. Right there, seems like. Okay, let's get it a little bit clear. There's probably the best. Right. As far as seeing that. Good, good. So that was just a very short clip with this patient, and for her, she was kind of exploring with this little target. And she could see it most clearly in the 7 o'clock position. That was likely the position of her preferred retinal locus, the PRL. Most likely at 7 o'clock. She saw it the worst around the 2, 3, 4 o'clock position. So that's just one way of helping your patient to develop scotoma awareness. And that, as I said, that's the key to the next step, which is retraining of fixation or scanning. Now, this isn't vision therapy. We're not doing any eye exercises when we're talking about eccentric viewing or scanning training. So eccentric fixation or eccentric viewing is when we train a person who has a central visual field loss to find a clearer area of vision, and then to move that blind spot out of the way and to position their gaze so that the image lands on that preferred retinal locus. So, for example, over here, if a person looking directly at the word on the left, they have the scotoma, which is represented by this dark purple hexagon. They may mistake that word for oat. It might be cat. But if they look above the word, so if their preferred retinal location for fixation was at 6 o'clock, so if they looked in the opposite direction, if they look towards 12 o'clock and they position that PRL on the word, then they might see cat. So this is a skill that we can help a person develop. Here is just another illustration, and perhaps if a person looking at a clock may not see the whole image clearly, if they had a PRL at 7 o'clock, like the lady in the video had demonstrated, if a person makes an eye movement towards 1 o'clock, and they kind of clear, they make it clearer by making that eye movement. So eccentric viewing training is tricky. It depends on the distance. It depends on a lot of things. Sometimes the shape of the scotoma isn't just a neat round area or island. It could be in a C shape. It could be like a bagel or a donut shape. So it is very tricky. It's not simple, and it just takes a lot of practice and patience with your patient. And also keep in mind that the amount of detail that we can see degrades the further we get away from the fovea. So depending on how far you have to move your eye, it doesn't really mean that you're going to see everything sharply and clearly either. Okay, moving on. So to scanning. So when we're talking about scanning, this is relevant for people who have visual field loss, and this is training to make eye and head movements towards the area of vision loss. So it's a visual skill that we want to start off with. As I said, you want to always start off with awareness of the missing visual field, because our brain likes to complete information. As I said, you know, if you look with one eye, if you cover one eye and you try and discover where your anatomical blind spot is, your brain is just actively filling in that information. So it's not easy to know necessarily where your missing field is. And in people who have peripheral field loss, often really don't notice it until it starts to impact function, because we don't pay attention to the edges of our visual field. So it's really important for your patient to develop insight and to really understand that they have this missing visual field so that they can interact more safely with their environment. The next step is that the patient needs to develop an intentional scan strategy. So this is a cognitive choice, it's a conscious effort, and it's going to involve wide head movements and you want the missing visual field, they need to use an organized search pattern starting in the missing visual field. It needs to be intentional. It could be a linear strategy or a circular strategy. But scanning should, the end goal is for scanning into that missing visual field to become automatic, so that it's a conscious, you know, it starts off being a conscious effort, but then it becomes automatic. This is a little adapted exercise from the BIVABA. So the BIVABA is the Brain Injury Visual Assessment Battery for Adults that was developed by an American occupational therapist by the name of Mary Warren, who's been a pioneer in the United States for low vision rehabilitation. She developed an assessment battery, and there are a couple of like cancellation type tasks that have to do with scanning. And one of the tasks is it's a page that has got 40 circles and in a random order. And so I've used this with patients before, and I'm going to show an example of a kind of before and after treatment. So on the top left-hand corner is the completed circle. So what I did was I put the page in front of the patient, and I told him there were circles on the page, and I wanted him to put a number in each circle starting at the number 1. So 1, 2, 3, and on the top in that first example of my patient's work, you can see that he started with a circle on the right hand side of the page. He numbered kind of in a zigzag and then went towards the left and missed a whole bunch on the bottom left corner. What's really useful about this exercise is it gives a very good visual representation of the patient's search strategy. By comparison, after scanning, training, treatment, on the bottom right of the slide, you can see the results when he did this a month later. So I gave the same exercise to him again after a month, and you can see that he numbered starting in the top left-hand corner, starting with the circle, and he had developed an organized strategy to number the circles, and then I like to do the next phase, which I then ask the patient to join kind of dot to dot, like number to number. All right. So some for the OTs, we talk about grading the activity. You can start from narrow to wide, from single to multiple objects, from sitting to standing, and then walking. So doing scanning while starting off sitting, and then add the time demand. And here are some activities, ideas. You can do card and board games, word searches. You can look up telephone numbers, and of course, I'm English speaking, so. I'm always considering going from left to right. People who speak other languages, it might be different. Anyway, I don't want to get sidetracked. So doing keyboarding, filling out forms, looking for items in a community setting, gardening. There's a lot of different activities that you can practice scanning. Here's a picture of a patient who was playing a game of solitaire that I taught him, a card game. It was 4 cards that he had to lay down and then remove the cards according to a certain pattern. The trash pile was on the left-hand side. I had to cover up the bottom of the cards, and the reason was, so I'll give you a little bit of background. This patient had a left homonymous hemianopsia, so had a left visual field cut in both eyes, and the reason that I had to cover up the cards was because he was actually looking at the card numbers on the bottom right hand side of the card deck. I discovered this and I thought, okay, that's not helping. So I kind of was forcing him to recognize and identify the card numbers on the upper left hand corner. But as OTs, we're inventive. We can think of a lot of different activities and ideas. So let's talk about resizing the image. So what needs to reach the retina? Is it a bigger image or a smaller image? Again, as occupational therapists working with people with low vision, we have to understand what is going on with their eyes and whether magnification is appropriate or magnification is appropriate. Again, this is a decision that's made by an optometrist or an ophthalmologist, but the OT needs to understand the pattern of vision loss. Magnification is going to be appropriate for people who have central vision loss and contrast sensitivity loss, and we can make use of the peripheral retina. But sometimes people need things made smaller, and so minification is appropriate for people who have peripheral field loss, and you want to keep the image as small as possible to fit into the seeing retina. So it's just important for us to understand that magnification isn't always the answer just because a person has low vision. Teaching skills to use devices is also imperative. There's a lot of skills that come with using a device. So alignment on the left side, there's images of a lady trying to look through a very high-powered lens, and she was having trouble looking at the face of her watch. So alignment means basically lining up the better seeing eye with the preferred retinal locus, with the lens, with the target, so making sure everything is in line. And sometimes the hand and the eye, the better eye and the dominant hand, sometimes they cross. So we have to work with our patients on these skills. It's really important that we understand that any lens system, any optical system that the patient has, there's a focal distance. So the image is going to be the sharpest at a particular distance. So focusing the device, making sure if it's a telescope, focusing the telescope or holding the materials in the right focal distance that's another skill that we have to practice with clients. Localization or locating information, helping patients to build these cognitive maps of reading materials, particularly things like page margins. So you'll have patients who will have a stand magnifier. So that's a magnifier that's encased in like a walled unit, and sometimes patients will only see what's in through the lens, but not really go all the way to the end of the sentence or back to the beginning of the sentence. So those are text navigation and localization skills. So those are skills that we can work with our patients on learning to use their devices. Eye-hand coordination is another skill. So with electronic magnification, I'll get to that in a little bit, but with electronic magnification, for example, just learning how to maneuver the table that's underneath the camera. So I'm going to show you a small little video of like one of the exercises that I've done. I taped a little coin to the middle of the screen, and I had the patients kind of as if it was a little, I told the person that they needed to keep the coin in on the line as they went from, kind of followed the line from A all the way to B. So that was just practicing handling this XY table on a CCTV. A lot of patients will move the piece of paper, and that's not very efficient. And then on the right-hand side, we see a patient also practicing writing using an electronic magnifier. So it just requires that eye-hand coordination, looking somewhere else rather than at your hand. If you've been used to, looking at the tip of your pen while you're writing. Another intervention related to the person is encouraging self-advocacy. So help your patient develop and practice using a script. For example, saying, it's hard for me to see when we walk into the dark building. Can I take your arm? So encourage your patients to advocate for themselves, or I can't recognize you easily because I have macular degeneration. So many patients tell me how they stop socializing because they don't recognize their friends, and they don't want to be rude. So helping them to just develop their own script so that they can help themselves. Improving health literacy is another aspect of the person that we can certainly work on. So health literacy, that's a constellation of skills. It means the person has the ability to perform basic reading and numerical tasks for functioning and navigating in a healthcare environment. Now, I know that the healthcare system in the United States is very different from the healthcare system in other countries, but there are some basics. I have a lot of patients who can't really say the name of the eye disease. And if you can't say macular degeneration, or look, how are you going to look up information about it? So it's very important to provide accurate knowledge, to explain about the eye disease. On the left-hand side, there's some pictures of CDs, and nobody uses CDs anymore, but we have in the United States, there's something called the National Eye Institute that put out a lot of free information about different age-related eye diseases that lead to low vision, and that was freely available, so I would give that to patients. Educating your patients about what are the effects of the eye disease. Another thing that patients very rarely learn about, usually I'm the first to tell them, and that's Charles Bonnet syndrome. So that is when people experience visual hallucinations that are related to vision loss, but they don't want to talk about it, and they don't want to tell anybody because they don't know that it's something that they should expect. So that's another having patients know what to expect of their eye disease is very important. Use plain language and simplify information. Another aspect to health literacy is explaining current treatments versus futuristic or sham treatments. And so, having an intraocular lens placed in your eye after cataract surgery is a real treatment, but having an eye transplant is not a real, that's futuristic. Hopefully one day in the future that will happen. Some people might believe that 100% dead chicken egg yolk might prevent eye disease. We want to base our recommendations on what we know, and not what is sham treatment. You want to dispel myths. For some patients, they don't really know, like patients might be afraid of using their vision. So if I use my eyes for detail work, will I lose my vision? So you want to make sure that you're having discussions with your patients about their own attitude toward their vision. Will it hurt my eyes if I read in the dark? Okay, so there are some myths. And people aren't always comfortable talking about these things. So just have discussions. Let's move on. As I said, I have a lot to cover, and almost an hour has gone by, so I'm going to continue to get through this, and I appreciate your patience. Let's get to the environment. So matching the light to the task. This is so important over here. There are recommended levels of lux, of the amount of brightness that you should have. Sometimes all it is just replacing a light bulb. I have two examples on the left side of the slide. On the top is a patient had a soft white bulb. It was very strong. The power of the bulb was actually, it exceeded the fixture, the recommended amount of wattage that was allowed in the fixture, and so that was dangerous because it could lead to an electrical fire. And I had recommended so this is at least 10 years ago. The technology of lighting has changed, but at the time I replaced the light bulb with a daylight, so a different color temperature, a daylight bulb that was only 26 watts, but it was one of those compact fluorescent bulbs, and the difference was quite remarkable for the patient. On the right-hand side, I'm showing a light meter that's measuring the amount of light. If you're going to be using a light meter, make sure that you're using it in the area where the occupation occurs. There are different levels of light that are recommended, and you can find those at different websites. But for detailed vision, you need a lot of light. And so having a flexible arm lamp is very good and highly recommended for detail work. Closer is better. So the closer that you bring the light source toward the target, there's an exponential relationship. It's not a one-to-one relationship. It actually increases exponentially the amount of brightness. So flexible arm lamps are great. And nowadays, LED bulbs are highly recommended because they don't get hot. They don't get it as hot as a traditional incandescent bulb. I would not recommend a halogen bulb. They get very, very, very hot. Would not recommend it. And remember that people with low vision will tend to try to get closer. At least people with central vision loss will tend to get closer, so they'll get closer to the light source as well, and you don't want to have a burn. So LED lamps are great these days, but having that flexible arm is very important. Have a flashlight. So I've actually put flashlights on a leash, on a dog leash, and left it hanging in the closet so the patient could turn it on and look at her clothing, because in a lot of closets there's no light. So have flashlights are a very, very nice option. Again, these days you have LED flashlights. So just in general lighting, older adults need more light than young people. Light to dark adaptation is slower. So going from a light environment indoors into dark is slower. You want to match the light to the task. Visual comfort for mobility is subjective. So sometimes too much light is just as bad as having not enough light. So speak with your patient about it. Very important to consider the position of the light source. So light can create glare and shadows. Consider the type of light source. If it produces flicker, like fluorescent lighting. Some people are more sensitive and can see the flicker. I mentioned heat, for example, in the halogen bulbs. Those are dangerous. Consider the surface that the light falls onto, because it can produce glare. The distance of the light source, and as I said, for detailed tasks, the closer the light, the better. And then the distribution of light, whether it's creating spotlights and shadows, etc. All right, so we spoke about light. Let's talk about glare. So you want to eliminate glare sources. Glare, just in general, glare can produce eye strain. Glare on objects reduces the contrast of the object as well. So consider things like paint finishes. Sometimes you may want to repaint surface or cover surfaces so that you eliminate glare. And remember that glare, it's subjective, but glare can also occur inside the eyes, but we covered that at the beginning. In the environment, we can use contrast and color. And so this is fairly easy. You want to use opposite tones and opposite colors to make things stand out against the background. Sorry, let me go back to the pictures. I'll describe what we're looking at. On the left-hand side are receptacles, electrical outlets in the patient's home. You can get them in different colors. And so we switched the plates around the electrical covers so that the white electrical outlet had a black electrical cover, and it just made the electrical sockets stand out much easier for plugging in appliances. Something as simple as a cutting board can help to provide contrast. So using a colored cutting board rather or just a color that is opposite or different from whatever it is that you're cutting. In bathrooms, so bathrooms tend to be one color, monochromatic. A lot of people just prefer white. They're shiny surfaces. So just using props, for example, a colored towel draped over the side of the tub can help a person to gauge where the edge of the tub is for stepping over, or a colored washcloth underneath the white soap can help the person see where it is. Here's an example of a comb, a dark comb against a white washcloth. It stands out a little bit easier to see. On the left-hand side over here, this person's driveway had a little raised curb, and it was hard to see it. And so you can get tape that you can stick down onto the concrete just as a hazard sign to make it more visible. In this picture, the person's microwave, I put some colored, contrasting colored stickers. I cut some labels, yellow labels. I cut them into little thin strips and stuck them onto the microwave, and it was easier for the person to see the numbers on the number pad and then use the microwave. So sometimes solutions can be very simple. Reducing pattern and visual clutter is very important. So this picture is an example of very poor, of a lot of visual clutter because of a lot of patterns. So in the top picture is another picture of a plate of food. The plate is very has got a decoration on it of flowers, and it's very difficult to see what's the food on the plate. And the bottom picture is the same food on a solid colored plate. It can still be very pretty. It doesn't have to just be black and white, but just thinking about how to use color and contrast to modify the environment. Organizing environments is another thing that we can do to help our patients. So sorting and grouping things together. Here is an example of this patient's walk-in closet. I met the patient in inpatient rehabilitation. She had come in for a fractured hip. She broke her hip because she was in this closet. She was reaching for something. She fell. She broke her hip, but the closet was so disorganized, and so I helped her to put things, organize them, label them. We grouped her clothing according to color, so that it was easier for her to find the articles of clothing that she wanted because they were sorted by color. Objects in the environment, you can resize objects. What do I mean? Okay, so here's an example. Another microwave panel that was hard to read. So I actually made an enlarged diagram for my patient, and she could just hold it up and see, instead of trying to look at the microwave, she just looked at this diagram. It was easier for her to figure out what she needed. Resizing labels. So we have medicine labels and labels on spices. The examples are endless. On the upper left hand side of this slide, there's a picture of a woman's phone number list, so that was made bigger so that she could see them. And on the bottom so that's an example. On the bottom, there's a keyboard that's got stickers on each key. So they're these stickers that you can purchase that enlarge the keys of the computer. You can also resize things on the computer. So things like icons, desktop icons, the font sizes on the computer, etc. I mentioned that the environment also includes the social environment. So I think it's very important to educate the caregivers. So one thing that I've found is that simulators have been very beneficial for caregivers who don't understand the impact of vision loss. Because oftentimes that vision loss is hidden. It's not obvious on the person. And families get frustrated. They don't understand what's really going on with their loved one. So using simulators and having the caregivers do activities with simulators has been beneficial. Encouraging social support. I don't have a slide for this, but I'm sure in your local area there are support groups. There might also be self-management groups. So a couple of years ago, I ran a vision loss self-management group, which was it's a little bit different from a traditional support group, but whatever you have locally, I would encourage, because people with low vision tend to become isolated. So we want to encourage social support groups and social networking. I'm going to move on to the last area, which is the area of occupation. So over here, we're looking at several things. So let's start off with matching the optical devices to the person and the task that they're doing. So it's really important for us to understand, for people working with patients with low vision, specifically I'm talking about and to occupational therapists, it's important for us to understand how different devices work and for which distance they're intended to be used, because devices are, they typically classified for either for use for near, for activities up close, at an intermediate or an arm's length distance, or at a distance that's greater than 6 meters or 20 feet. So distance, so out there, far away, that's distance. Now, there's single lens systems. They're typically designed for near activities. They can include handheld magnifiers, stand magnifiers, the high-ad spectacles for reading, or even clip-on or head-borne types of lenses. On the left-hand side, on the top, we see these are very, very strong reading glasses. They're very high-ad reading glasses. The picture underneath on the left, on the bottom left, is a clip-on lens, also used for a near activity. In the middle, we have a dome type of magnifier. Person was just shining a flashlight through it, but it's a thick, it's like a paperweight. It's a kind of a stand magnifier. And then on the right is a picture of a man that's wearing a magnifier, and that's for like crafting and being able to use both of his hands. So we want to understand what task this person is trying to do so that the magnifier matches. So just in general about devices that are used for near, these types of devices that I mentioned, when the power of the magnifier increases, so if you get, you have a 3x versus a 10x, okay? 10x is a higher power. The device is going to be smaller, or the area to look through is going to be smaller. The field of view is going to be smaller. And then the focal distance, so the distance that the person has to hold it from the target, is going to be much smaller as well. So those are just some general principles to keep in mind when using devices for near. Now, in contrast, telescopes are typically two lens systems, and they're used for looking far away, so for seeing things at a distance, and they usually include binoculars or monoculars, TV glasses. The picture on the left is a person using something called TV glasses, and then bioptic telescopes, which can be used for driving. So for people who are using a telescope, when the power of the telescope increases, so like the difference between a 2x telescope and a 6x telescope, what you need to know is that the size of the device is going to increase. It's going to be a bigger device. Typically, the field of view is going to be smaller, but the visual reach is going to be further. It's going to be able to see farther away with a more powerful telescope. Also, the motion, so the motion through the device, so seeing far but really lining it up, there's going to be a lot of blur as well. Another type of device that the patient may have is an electronic magnifier. They can be handheld or like at a desktop, like a computer. And of course, nowadays, they also have head-borne or wearable electronic magnifiers, but I'm not going to go into that right now. But these are also known as CCTVs. They usually have a lot of power, and they have variable magnification, so several levels of magnification that can be used with an electronic magnifier. Most of them are used for near tasks, but some of them also have a rotating camera, so they can be pointed in different directions. The picture on the right is showing a woman putting on her own makeup, so it's pointed at her. The cameras can be rotated to point far. For example, if there's a student in a classroom, it can be used to point at the blackboard, maybe. Electronic devices can really manipulate that visual image, take away color variations, turn a colored image into a black and white. They can reverse the image, make black print on a white background, turn it into white print on a black background, or yellow print on a black background. So there's a lot of possibilities. And the newer generation of these CCTVs, some of them also have optical character recognition, so they can actually read back to you. So there's a lot of power in them. They're very expensive as well. Okay, so we talked about matching the optical devices to the task. So we want to understand how the device is used for what kind of occupations. But we also can promote using other senses, especially using methods that rely less on vision when vision is unreliable. So using the sense of, sound, so listening, feeling, smelling, so tactile senses. So here's an example on the left. There's 2 spice bottles. The spice bottle on the left with garlic salt has got a rubber band around it to differentiate it from a similar looking spice bottle on the right, which is seasoned salt, which doesn't have a rubber band. On the right hand side of the screen is a picture of keys. One of the keys has got a special key, I want to say a key holder, but it's something that you put the key in and it really differentiates the key. So that's great if somebody wants to put it on their house key, so when they get home they don't have to fumble and try and figure out which key do they need to fit into their door. So using other senses. There's talking devices. We have on the top left hand side, there's a talking blood sugar meter, a glucometer. On the bottom left is a talking calculator. On the right hand side is a scale that talks to you. And in the middle is a picture of a pen friend. It's a type of device. There's a lot of different similar devices that you there's a label, a recordable label, and then there's a device. Nowadays there's an app that you can have on your phone, but you basically record the label, so it reads back to you in your own voice whatever you said on that label. So that's just another type of device that's out there. In the United States, we also have a free talking book library through the Library of Congress, where patrons of the library who sign up for the service, it's completely free. They'll receive a device. It's digital nowadays. It used to be reel-to-reel old cassette players, but nowadays reel-to-reel and for books on many, many different topics. And it's all done through the mail. So this is for reading. Haptics is the sense that's described in orientation and mobility for using a white cane. So you want to talk to your patient about using a long white cane, which provides a lot of proprioceptive and kinesthetic and tactile feedback. I have a friend who's an orientation mobility specialist, and he describes it as having long fingertips that reach towards the ground as you're walking. Some people might opt for hiking canes. So the picture on the right is of 2 people using hiking poles or hiking sticks that provide for more stability. It's a deep conversation. A lot of people see the white cane. A lot of my patients, in my experience, view the white cane as a symbol of disability, and I try and help them see it as a symbol of independence. I tell them that the white cane it's kind of like Moses parting the Red Sea from the Bible. When they pull out that cane, and people give them a little bit of room and are more understanding, because a lot of people who can't see where they're going, if they bump into somebody or something, can get very rude stares and comments. So it's a deep conversation that sometimes requires a lot of just a lot of communication about it. So that's about using other senses, simplifying occupations. There's a lot of ways that you can simplify occupations. I'm going to just give you an example. This is old. I remember ordering a magnifier, and these were the instructions that came with the magnifier. They came in 5 languages on a gray piece of paper. Very difficult for the patient to understand what was going on. So I spent some time cutting out the information that wasn't needed and just changing. So on the left-hand side, on the top of the picture is how the information came, and on the bottom is how I changed it. So, you know, just changing the presentation of information and simplifying is important. You can simplify work areas as well, the desktop. So a lot of my older patients who use desktops have got a lot of clutter on their desktops. They don't really know how to change things or how it works. So you can so you can simplify the physical desktop as well as a virtual desktop on a computer. So again, these are just ideas, and I'm sure you have more than I'm presenting over here. Simplifying tasks. So sorting mail can become very overwhelming because it's a visual task. So finding a method that works for your patients to simplify the task of sorting mail, sorting laundry, making monthly payments. Maybe there's ways of banking online that, or, you know, making payments, regular payments online. Recording checks, you know, if a patient is writing out checks and then how they're recording it, maybe you can make an enlarged check ledger for them. In the United States, people can receive directory assistance for looking up phone numbers instead of trying to look them up themselves. Again, that's a little bit of an old, for us in the United States, I haven't seen a telephone book in a couple of years. So, but directory assistance, it can be helpful. Things like, you know, buying pre-cut and pre-peeled vegetables that can simplify the task of making a meal and make it safer. Repositioning. So getting closer, it can be helpful. Over here is an example of a woman who was playing the piano, and she had trouble seeing her music. And so we rigged, I'm saying we, I was working with a student at the time, we rigged up another a stand so that we brought her music closer to her. We created a stand for her so she could be repositioned, or her sheet music was repositioned so that she could see it better. I don't know if you can appreciate on this picture, on the very right hand side, her son had made photocopies of her sheet music, and they were very large sheets of paper, like huge poster size sheet music, but there was no ways that she could get that sheet music to stand and read it. So this was a better solution. Also getting comfortable, repositioning, using pillows, you know, that can help with maintaining the distance that is required and getting your patient comfortable. You can also be creative. So this is a particular strategy that I found that worked with the patient. She had a right homonymous hemianopsia, so she was missing the visual field on the right hand side. And when we turned the paper to the half a turn to the right, she was then reading vertically, and she was reading, because it was turned to the right, she was reading kind of away from the missing visual field, and that worked for her. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to work for everyone, because this lady happened to have a stroke. She had the right homonymous hemianopsia, but with strokes, there's often other areas of the brain that are impacted that can also impact language. So it may not work, but you can be creative with positioning of materials. Use other objects for ADLs. So on the top left-hand corner is a type scope. So that just it's kind of like a little slotted window to help the patient see where they needed to read. You know, some other objects are on the bottom over here are high contrast measuring cups, bold lined paper in the middle with a marker. And on the right hand side, this lady was using a Kindle or an iPad, or maybe it was an iPad with a Kindle app. I don't know. She was using a tablet for reading. So she was just using something else than she was used to for the same ADLs. Over here on the top left-hand corner, we have a lady using a magnifying mirror, large big button phone. Reading stands are important to consider as well for comfort and for positioning. On the top right-hand side, we have a person using a signature guide to help him maintain the place for signing his name. And on the bottom right-hand side, we have a person using a check writing guide. So it's just a little slotted black piece of plastic, which has got the holes cut out for where the person needs to put the information. Okay, we have just two more. We're almost done. Again, related to the occupations, you want to address routines. So if vision fluctuates, which it does in a lot of conditions, you want to adjust routines so that visual tasks are done when vision is best. Plan ahead. You want to balance visual and non-visual activities throughout the day so that a person gets some relief, because using vision can create a lot of strain and stress. With that, make sure that you build in rest breaks, both visual rest breaks and postural rest breaks. When, if a person is going to be performing intense visual activities. And then regarding routines, I also mentioned tracking systems. Before I get to tracking systems, I do want to show you an example of a software that was developed several years ago called Rapid Reader. And it's a software that was developed for reading volumes of a lot of information, so for prolonged reading. I have a little video that will illustrate what it's like. And again, you can look this up if you're interested in it. It's just called Rapid Reader. You may find you can download the software. So over here, I'm just adjusting it. But what it does is it displays one word at a time. So a person just maintains fixation in one position, and the images are just, you can control the rate, the speed at which you receive this information. And over here, it's turned up pretty high over here, and I'm talking, so I don't expect you to to know to have absorbed any of that. But I've actually used that software myself, and I find it very, very beneficial for reading through large volumes of information. Tracking systems, so help your patient just develop systematic ways so that they can get through their routines and track. When I say tracking, I'm thinking about making sure that they're keeping up with their appointments, so writing it large enough on a calendar where they can see it. Tracking when they put in their eye drops. So eye drops, how do you track eye drops in a bottle? So here's a system that I learned from a friend of mine from long ago, using an empty medicine case with, so this person had to put their eye drops in 2 times a day. So there were 2 coins, 1 coin for each to represent each time he put in his eye drops. So say it was Monday. Today is, what is today? Today's Wednesday. Oh, well, never mind. Let's say Monday. So after he put in his eye drops, then he would put the coin in from Sunday. He would move it to Monday the first time. And then in the evening, once he put in his eye drops again, then he would put the coin in the Monday slot. And then on Tuesday when he woke up, as soon as he put the eye drops in on Tuesday morning, he would move 1 coin from Monday to Tuesday. And then the second coin from Monday to Tuesday in the evening when he put in his eye drops. So that's just develop a system with your patients so that they can keep up with their routines. Lastly, facilitate occupations that promote safety and well-being. So, okay, so community mobility. Over here, we want to look at adjusting time of day. So, look at the lighting. Of course, we can't manage the weather, but build routines that take advantage of the time of day. You may want to take the longer but the safer route. And then orientation and mobility instruction, I do not provide that. It's not in my scope of practice. I don't know if it's a little bit different in South Africa, but I always recommend that the person receive orientation and mobility instruction, at the very least sighted guide technique, using the sighted guide technique. As I mentioned, I discuss with them using a cane or a guide dog if that's what they're interested in, and using public transportation. So those are conversations that need to happen, and that's well within our scope of practice as occupational therapists. Health management, so we want to make sure that there's accessible information. So it's really important that people have accessible medication lists, allergy lists, their phone numbers, physician emergency numbers, so the ICE numbers, that's in case of emergency, that those numbers are easily accessible. Self-monitoring of central visual field using an Amsler grid. So often patients receive from the eye doctor, they have this Amsler grid, but they don't know how to use it. So teach them the correct technique of doing it. If there's fluctuations in their visual function, so again, teach them to monitor, to be more mindful, like, is it happening? Is poorer vision connected with higher blood sugar, with fluid retention, with the daily cycle, with physical stress? So being more mindful of their own eye disease and their own eye condition and monitoring it is very important. And lastly, I'll just touch on exercise. So people with low vision can and are allowed to exercise, but there might need to be modifications that are made to their exercises, maybe in bending, lifting, straining, rapid movements. So discuss that with the ophthalmologist or the optometrist or their healthcare provider to make sure that they're not going to do something that can result in a bleed in the eye or something. So optometry and ophthalmology are our partners, and we want to partner with optometry and ophthalmology who can take care of many of these things that we talked about: lens design, glare reduction. There's a lot of things, but there's a lot of things that occupational therapy can help with. And I'm hoping that using this person environment occupation model will help us to realize and support and justify how we can help our patients lead more meaningful lives and be more meaningfully engaged. If all the patients get are devices and glasses, then they might end up like this. So this is a lady who came. This was her first occupational therapy visit. She had a box full of devices, but she couldn't do anything. And so there's so much more that we can do. So again, here are my references. I just want to say thank you. You've been very attentive. I know that there were a couple of times that hands were raised, and I'm sorry I did not stop to take any questions. I did want to get through this. I asked for 90 minutes. It's exactly an hour and a half. So thank you so much for your attention, and I'll be glad to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Orli. Right, let's see what questions there are. I know that there have been a few people asking if we could send them the recording, and we definitely will do that. It will go out next week. And just for those of you who are new here today, all the previous recordings can be found on lowvision.co.za and click on the webinars. We have done, I think, 58 webinars over the pandemic. What questions have we got?
There are no questions at the moment, but what are coming through are thank yous. Thank you for a very informative webinar and that kind of comment. People are thrilled with what I think that they've learned today.
All right. Orli, well, clearly you answered everybody's questions, and that was great. And I think that just reinforced the importance of understanding pathology, understanding how devices work, and maybe just reinforcing what the doctor has already told the patient, but maybe because they were very stressed or have just forgotten, OTs can always just reinforce that.
100%. Yes.
Yeah.
You know, in the clinical visit, you retain such a small amount of what is told to you typically, and it's very overwhelming. So yes, you're right. Yeah. I didn't mean to imply that, you know, patients don't get the information from the source.
No. I think that what happens is so often they come in and they are so overwhelmed because they don't actually know what is going to happen at the session. And sometimes they go home, most times they go home with the sudden realization that there's so much available to them. And this just makes them think laterally and think, oh my goodness, then all that stuff I've given away or packed aside to give away, I'm going to bring it along to the OT to ask her how to use it. So we certainly see a lot of that. There are a lot of new OTs on today. And as I said to you, we are very excited that there are a lot more OTs wanting to go into the field of low vision, which is really, really nice.
So exciting. Yes. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been an honor. Have a great day.
Thank you so much. And next week's talk is a geneticist from the States as well, also ex-South African. And Professor Bryn Levy is going to do prenatal genetic diagnosis. So we look forward to a very exciting talk next week again. Thank you so much. And Orli, I will send you the recording as soon as it's done.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Go well. Stay safe. Bye.
Bye.